I need a moment after that text. Grace, mercy, and peace to you in the name of the triune God, and welcome to the 157th academic year. We have been together now for a week in classes and with the extra gifts and joys and complexities and perhaps even moments of being multiply overwhelmed that intensive courses and a new academic year brings. Welcome to this journey, which I know for many have included some interruptions along the way. God has promised to be present even in and through those interruptions. Whether you are here for the first time, returning to finish this part of your academic journey, or emeriti professors or faculty and staff, we all join together with each other on this wild adventure of interruptions with the triune God. This text for today, which is the assigned text for the coming Sunday, introduces us to just how complicated this journey with Jesus can be. Today's reading is complex and mystifying and rife with justifications of self-interest. So I wonder if we can hear this parable today within the larger context of Luke's account of Jesus' journey to Jerusalem. For in this part of Luke's gospel, Jesus is heading to Jerusalem. And this seems like a trip that is filled with a lot of feasting interspersed with financial parables of all sorts. Luke talks a lot about food. There are 19 meals in these chapters of Luke, 13 that are specific to Luke. These stories of banquets and instruction in discipleship abound. Jesus is in fact even criticized for eating too much and with the wrong kind of people. These recent weeks in Luke's gospel challenge us with the attention they give to possessions and to money. It seems that Jesus spends so much time talking about money when the call of the disciples included leaving their possessions in order to follow Jesus. So there seems to be a little inconsistency in the ways in which Luke talks about wealth. In one passage, the poor, not the rich, are blessed, and yet in Acts 20, it's more blessed to give than to receive. In Luke 19, one person is praised for giving away half of his goods, and in chapter 18, another's rejected because he won't give it all. Luke doesn't provide a simple solution or a social plan for the use of wealth. He simply outlines a problem and offers comments on the peril that awaits if nothing is done. He doesn't prescribe a particular economic or political system or social order which will solve this problem. Today's text frames the difficulty with possessions in a slightly different way. I confess, to me it reads more like a human resources case study than helpful instruction on stewardship. You know, charges were brought to the rich man about a manager, and so the rich man fires the manager. Meanwhile, the manager sets out to reduce the debts owed to the rich man so folks will welcome the manager into their homes when he's unemployed. Have you ever been caught between two painful choices? Interrupted when you thought you had things all figured out? As Jesus journeys to Jerusalem, he encounters interruptions along the way. These interruptions are not simple moralisms or instructions on how to do the right thing or turn here or avoid this kind of unacceptable behavior. These interruptions woven throughout Jesus' journey open ways for us to reimagine our own journey as those who have gathered here to form this new community of learning for this 157th academic year. So welcome to this journey of interruptions and mystifying conundrums. There are three themes for pondering these interruptions that I want to focus on this morning: paying attention, feasting, and blessing. The first, paying attention. This journey of Jesus invites the full attention of all our senses. Today's parable is filled with details of complaint, of accounting, of engaging in behavior which benefits oneself, of questionable labor practices, of yearning for belonging, of relationships with others and divided loyalties. In Luke, the Pharisees and disciples are paying attention to what Jesus is up to, including tracking what he's doing on the Sabbath. They are paying close attention because they're expecting something to happen. There are many distractions and competing claims for your attention. There may be events, doubts, other people, or burdens which will draw your attention away from God, away from study or friendships, away from your family, away from your health and well-being. And these interruptions of Jesus along the way remind us to pay attention. For we have been set into this learning community and all the other communities in which you all will be embedded this year to be the eyes, the ears, the intellect, the passion, the heart for God's work in the world and for the world, with and for one another. And you will be interrupted. Paying attention is not simply paying attention to the present moment. In this learning community, it's also about paying attention to the wisdom and voices of those who have gone before us. The wisdom and voices of the history of faith traditions, of other scholars, of cultures and contexts, and paying attention to people or situations whom you find uncomfortable and gnarly. And guess what? Some people may find you uncomfortable and gnarly from time to time. So paying attention is anticipation and trust that God is at work, perhaps especially through the people and situations whom you find most difficult. Paying attention keeps open the possibility for new learning, deepening life in prayer and study, in work and in relationships. Paying attention is a call to be ready for God's surprises, ready for things to be turned upside down. Professor Malcolm reminds us that Luke turns most everything upside down. The proud are scattered, the powerful are brought down, the lowly are lifted up, the hungry are filled, and the rich are sent away empty. Pay attention to these interruptions, because things may not be as they first appear. In a new book that one of our faculty members, Andy Root, and his spouse Cara wrote, called A Pilgrimage into Letting Go, helping parents and pastors embrace the uncontrollable. Cara wrote in this beautiful longer poem on paying attention, she writes, "We will be noticers, you and I. We will be noticers of God. We will be noticers of other people. God will surprise us. People will need kindness, and we will notice both." And I would add, we will need and notice both, because paying attention keeps us poised and ready for action. Feasting is the second interruption, which calls us to pause, to linger, to take time out, to celebrate with joy and thanksgiving, both the great gifts God has given as well as the simple things. There's a lot of feasting on this journey to Jerusalem. Fellowship, teaching, and worship in the first century often occurred within the setting of a meal. And we have some feasting traditions here at Luther Seminary. There are community meals, Thursdays, as always, lunch church with a chance to hear testimony, as Dr. Willis Johnson shared so powerfully and eloquently yesterday. There are countless other informal occasions of feasting with small groups across campus, and exponentially more in the other ministry contexts where you all are embedded. And there is the main feast each week around a table, where we stand shoulder to shoulder as sinners in need of a morsel of bread and a sip of wine, Christ's own body and blood, shared and poured out as God's love for all time and for all, no exceptions, for all who come and need food for the journey. And there is the challenge of feasting when so many are hungry. How can we feast when injustice abounds, when poverty is widespread, when fear of the stranger and the immigrant is pervasive, when war rages on, when violence erupts without warning and death comes too soon? Jesus knows something about physical deprivation, violence, and injustice. And yet Luke's parables and stories abound with the feasting in the midst of want, feasting on the way to Jerusalem. In this parable today, the manager yearns for table fellowship and the chance to be welcomed into homes after he's fired. We can feast in the midst of want as witness to God's redeeming work, a physical sign of God's promise to be present in the midst of desperate situations, right here, right now, because God will have the last word and it will be a feast. All will have food, and the banquet table of God's love and justice and mercy is set for all, for you. Are you hungry for God? Are you yearning for the fullness of God's reign to break through? Yes. I'm just curious. Are you ready for something to happen? The late ecumenist and Sri Lankan theologian D.T. Niles, when asked for a description of evangelism, responded, "Evangelism is one beggar telling another beggar where to find bread." Are you hungry for God? Do you hunger for the sweet embrace of love and purpose? The sweet sound that you are valued, that you belong, that you make a difference? Are you hungry to be filled with God's mercy, with God's love, with God's forgiveness? Because in this feast, God has already made it so for you, no exceptions. We all and each are invited by Christ himself to the interruptions of feasting. The interruption to stop, to pause, to celebrate, to breathe deeply, and rejoice in simple things. Feasting calls us to be interrupted in our own agendas. Blessing is another interruption along the way. Luke's gospel ends with blessing, and blessing can stop you in your tracks. Through the vicissitudes of the journeys which have brought you to this place as students, as faculty, staff, as visitors, you will be blessed. We cannot presume to know under what circumstances, through whom, or in what ways God's blessing will come. In 1994, while I was living in the United Kingdom in Cambridge, I made the first of what turned out to be many visits to an Anglican order of contemplative nuns in Oxford. And near the end of each of these silent retreats, one of the nuns, it was always someone different, would come up to me as I was preparing to depart and would always ask me to bless her. Now, initially I felt really awkward, certainly ill-equipped. and frankly a bit unhappy that in my own seminary journey, I must have missed the bit on how to properly bless an Anglican contemplative nun. But these Anglican nuns taught me what it means to share God's blessing, and more importantly, how to ask for a blessing. So in early August of this year at the ELCA, Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, church-wide assembly in Phoenix, Arizona, did I mention it was August in Phoenix? Talk about needing a blessing. At the conclusion of one of the worship services, we left the chapel, and on the way back to the assembly hall, the corridor was lined with all the folks who had led and assisted in the service. And we were invited to just go to someone randomly of these folks and ask for a blessing. This interruption delayed our way to the assembly hall and the start of the next session. But it was clearly what I needed at that moment, and it seemed many others needed that as well. So the interruptions of paying attention, of feasting and blessing on this journey with Jesus invite us all into humility, into trusting God's promise to be with us in every place along the way. That is a promise you can count on. And when you forget that promise or become multiply overwhelmed by the headlines or heartaches of the day, ask for a blessing from someone else to remind you of God's promise of blessing. For God's blessing opens the way to act courageously, trusting that God will indeed bless what God can and forgive the rest. So perhaps this journey with Jesus is all about interruptions. So welcome. Amen.